This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
Welcome to the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Podcast, Episode 4. I'm your host, PWI Senior Writer Al Castle, joined as always by fellow Senior Writer Dan Murphy.
Hello, how's it going?
Good, thank you for joining us, as always. And we've got a real treat today. It's a special episode. We're going to be talking about the year-end awards. And so we've got our fearless leader, PWI publisher, Stu Sachs.
Hey, great to be with you guys.
Wait a second. Stu Sachs is a real person? I didn't know that. I thought he was just like Brandy Mankiewicz and Eddie Elner. Just
what are you talking about?
Imagination.
There's never been a farcical PWI writer in history.
Never.
We're on the open up. So yes, as I mentioned, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Year in Wrestling Award issue dropped last week, the digital version. The print version's coming out real soon. By now, a lot of the news is out there as far as who won Wrestler of the Year and all the other awards. So we're going to be talking about this today with a guy who knows this stuff as well as anybody. Stu, how long have you been working on the Year in Wrestling by now?
Well, it would be since the day I started, I would imagine. I came on board with PWI in 1979. And so that's, we've been doing the awards since 1972, so I've been there for a good chunk of the history.
And obviously, you know, you look at sensibilities now versus then. What do you see different? I mean, this was an era when guys like Jack Briscoe and those sort of names were the ones that usually ranked pretty high in these. You know, he talked a bit about that evolution over the last 40 years.
Well, I mean, I don't see a major evolution. I think that the fans vote for who they think is the best wrestler. You know, the sport has changed greatly, but I think that people still base their votes on who had the most successful year, and that's the way it should be.
It's interesting, you know, just like with the 500, you get a lot of feedback on, certainly now with social media, a lot of people not thrilled about certainly Wrestler of the Year, but different than the PWI 500. You know, our response has been an easy one. Well, you voted for him, you know, so that's what's special. That's what's great about the Year in Issues is that this is the voice of the fans, right?
It is the voice of our readers, and I think there's a distinction to be made. When we first announced that, you know, that for instance that Brock Lesnar was the Wrestler of the Year, there was a huge backlash on the internet, and for instance on WrestlingInc.com is where the story first broke. The amount of feedback was enormous, and a lot of people were, I can't believe you picked Brock Lesnar. He only wrestled 4 matches. You know, why aren't you rewarding somebody who had a whole year's worth of matches? Well, I was happy that the moderator of the discussion, Mike Bessler, who also works for us, kept reiterating the point that this was a fan vote. But it wasn't necessarily the vote of the people who were responding. It's our readers. And, you know, we would like every one of those people to be our readers, of course. But I think people have to understand that it's not a popularity vote. It's not a vote of who is the best in-ring worker. It's a vote of the people who read our magazine, and they might have a little different sensibility. They get what we're trying to do. They understand that we're trying to reward the person who had the most success in the ring, and you know, they vote. Yes, we had votes for a whole range of people. You know, a lot of the people that the internet wrestling community might have picked, but by and large, they went with who they thought had the most in-ring success, and I personally believe that's the way it should be. You know, it's certainly debatable whether Brock Lesnar was the guy who should have been picked. You know, having wrestled only 4 matches in the year, but a lot of people who were responding in favor of Brock Lesnar, even in these on these message boards, were pointing out that what he did during the year was so extraordinarily special that he was worthy of the award.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's jump right into it. Dan, we discussed this a couple weeks ago, and we forecast the possibility that this might happen, as crazy as it sounds, and the cover of the magazine says it all. I think he wrestled something like a total of 69 minutes in the entire year, compared to guys like John Cena, who would have gotten my vote, and Daniel Bryan, who obviously would have been a favorite, AJ Styles. What's your take on Brock Lesnar, a part-timer winning Wrestler of the Year?
It's a sign of the times, I think. As we kind of mentioned in an episode last week, there's more and more of these part-timers who have featured roles in WWE in recent years, and TNA to a lesser degree, I guess. But there's a more reliance on guys who are only working a handful of dates here and there. Triple H, Undertaker, The Rock in the past, now Brock Lesnar. And like Stu said, what Brock really did this year was just truly special. It stood out. I mean, he ended the streak, which, was unprecedented, obviously, and his domination of John Cena at SummerSlam was just completely without equal. So he really had that standout year without the lows. So I think that he's as good of a award winner for Wrestler of the Year as anybody.
Stu, do you have any concerns about the precedent this sets, that a guy who did so little, at least quantity-wise, certainly not quality-wise, could take home the top honors?
No, not really. I don't think there are precedents to be set in a fan vote. I think the fans will vote for who they feel deserves it. I think that on a positive note, talking about the balloting, the runner-up was Daniel Bryan. Let me just go backtrack a second. That Brock Lesnar won with 30% of the vote. Daniel Bryan was the runner-up with 23%. AJ Styles 17%, and John Cena 16%. And then significantly, the votes for others were 14%. And that means that a lot of people were kind of going outside the box and looking at guys who were who wouldn't be your standard front runners for such an award. And I think that speaks well of our readership. They're not just citizens of the WWE universe. They are citizens of the entire wrestling universe, and they look at things objectively. And, just AJ Styles was not what you consider a mainstream guy for the year 2014. He wasn't a TNA wrestler per se. He was he did Ring of Honor. He did a lot of his best work in New Japan, and for him to even get 17% of the vote when the wrestling world is so dominated by WWE, I think speaks well of the objectivity of our readership.
Yeah, and that was the name that I probably saw come up more than others in social media as far as who deserved this award, was AJ Styles. And again, I mean, I think that speaks to the changing face of wrestling fans and maybe our readership. What's your take, just observing on Brock Lesnar's years, Stu?
Well, I think in any other year, the guy who dominated WrestleMania as Daniel Bryan did would have won the award. But he wrestled for basically 5 months out of the 12. And that hurt him, especially the fact that those 5 months were the first 5 months. So the balloting reflected the time off that he had. It's unfortunate for him. But Brock Lesnar, what he did at WrestleMania, beating The Undertaker, obviously ending the streak, and then what he did to John Cena, kind of, I think, put John Cena out of the running because he dominated him so thoroughly in that one match at SummerSlam.
Yeah, for me, again, I would have voted for John, and part of it is that he was the full-time guy, and he's sort of the perennial full-time guy, right? And I just went to a Madison Square Garden house show a few weeks ago where he headlined, he had the crowd on his feet, he delivered a terrific match, and I think that's when it really hit me. It's 10 years of this now. For 10 years, he's been the guy. And I just think that that's always worthy of praise and reward. So yeah, that would have been my vote. But I also get that.
Now, by that token, John Cena could have been Wrestler of the Year for the past 10 years. Then
sure.
Well,
yeah. And you know what? I wouldn't necessarily have had a problem with that depending on who his competition was on any given year. But look, I think the world of Brock Lesnar as much as anyone. I think the guy is a first ballot Hall of Famer in any Hall of Fame. The guy is really just he's got a level of intensity, of credibility that you just don't see in wrestling today. So I don't begrudge him. A little surprised. Not sure he would have gotten my vote.
Now, the thing, Al, that's real interesting, and just because you kind of brought this up, it's been 10 years of this with John Cena. Guys, off the top of your head, I know this is kind of putting you on the spot, but I've got the answer right here. How many times in the past 10 years do you think John Cena's won Wrestler of the Year?
I'm going to guess 4.
I'll guess 3. I'll guess 3, but I really don't know off the top of my head.
It's 2. Only 2. And I think that when you look at it, I mean, Cena's definitely been the guy who's been the most consistent. But during that era, from, say, 2000, we'll say 2005 on, you had Batista in 2005. Cena won it back-to-back in 2006 and 2007. But then Triple H, Randy Orton again in 2010, CM Punk back-to-back in 2011 and 2012, and then Daniel Bryan last year. So he's been a consistent guy, but there's been room for other guys to kind of seize the top. And maybe it's because of that backlash that so many people have to John Cena that a lot of our readers tend to gravitate towards the hot guy as opposed to the guy who's been consistently good for the past decade.
Yeah. I also think that except for those years that he mentioned, 2006 to 2007, he hasn't necessarily been that dominant as far as a win-loss record. I just think back to all the meetings we had over the years for the PWI 500, and whenever we get to discussing Cena, there's always that, well, he lost a lot of big matches this year. Maybe that again, speaks to why he is that company guy, that he can take so many losses and remain the company guy. But, yeah, I think 2006, 2007 is when he had that really long title reign that was in the neighborhood of a year or so, maybe 10 months, interrupted by, I think, maybe an Edge title reign. But other than that, yeah, he's usually out there. Again, for all the heat the guy gets of not putting people over, hogging the spotlight, he actually does it quite a bit. Anyhow, the PWI year-end issue, obviously one of the biggest of the year. We call it the big one. And you can pick it up right now. The digital edition is available for download. Dropped last week. For just $14.99, you can get 6 digital issues delivered right to your mobile device, your laptop, your phone, what have you. That's just $2.50 an issue. If you want the print version, that's our bread and butter, obviously, in publication for 36 years now. You can get 6 issues of Pro Wrestling Illustrated for less than $21. That's just $3.50 an issue, half off the cover price. You get a deeper discount if you subscribe for 12 issues at $39. We've got the guy here, Stu. You want to give him the hard sell for why people should subscribe to Pro Wrestling Illustrated?
Well, if you like money and you want to save it, that's the way to do it. For the life of me, I don't understand why anybody wouldn't subscribe, because if they're buying the issue anyway, if they're going to the newsstand every other month to buy the issue, why not save 50% off and go to get the thing delivered right to your mailbox? But there are other options. If you don't want to do it all at once. We're running a sale on the website, www.pwi-online.com, and the issue, which by the way recently dropped in price to $6.99 on the newsstand, is available for $4.49.
Wow.
Plus $2 for shipping and handling. So you're saving a few bucks there, and you're getting it. You don't have to run around looking for the magazine. Unfortunately, the magazine isn't as prevalent on the newsstands as it was in years past. That's just a sign of the times for the entire publishing business. It's just very, very tough to get space on the newsstands. But you can get the magazine right on our website and delivered right to your door. You get a little discount, and you could also order the digital edition right at the website. So lots of ways to get it. I would prefer people actually get the magazine, read it, and comment on it afterward than just bitch and moan about it because they heard that Brock Lesnar is the Wrestler of the Year or the Usos are a Tag Team of the Year. Let's get the magazine, look at it, read the write-ups, find out why. Same thing with the PWI 500. There's so much stuff said and people complaining about it, but how many people pick it up and read it and understand the criteria and the time frame for the selections. I mean, you just make yourself more informed in your argument if you have the magazine in front of you. Plus, we get a couple of dollars out of it.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to it. I think a lot of people, if they don't pick up every issue, there are those destination issues, right? There's the year-end awards, there's the 500, there's maybe a couple others, the PWI poll, the female 50, depending what you're into. If you get just 2 or 3 of those, it quickly becomes worth it to subscribe. Get them all.
It sounds like the WWE Network.
That's right. Less than $9.99, in fact, per issue. But yeah, you definitely want to pick them up. You could get all information. You could subscribe at pwi-online.com. Also, find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at official PWI. Let's talk about some more of these awards categories. Tag Team of the Year. Who took Tag Team of the Year award honors to?
Well, the Usos, they won with not a huge percentage, but 21% of the vote. And I'm looking at my issue right here. The runner-up was Red Dragon with 17, the Wolves 14, and followed by Goldust and Stardust with 12. And again, I think this speaks well of our readership, even though it's very, very possible that Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish deserve to be Tag Team of the Year. They did an awful lot in 2014. They would have had my vote, but it's Ring of Honor and it's and to some extent New Japan. That's not mainstream to most American fans. As great a year as both of those companies had, it's WWE is still going to dominate. So for a team to come within 4 percentage points, as Red Dragon did, that's pretty amazing feat.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a moral victory. I can't remember a Ring of Honor or a New Japan tag team placing that high ever. I know the Briscoes maybe got a second or third runner-up spot a few years back, but to come, within striking distance of winning it, not being featured in WWE or TNA, that really speaks to Red Dragon.
And it was also a year where you had it was really an off year for TNA. The Wolves did very well. They were kind of my personal pick for Tag Team of the Year, and they were represented well. But TNA, by and large, there weren't a lot of teams, and there's a lot of parity in WWE. And with that going on, not a lot to select from in TNA, a lot of parity in WWE. It opened the door for a great team from Ring of Honor to kind of get in there. Another team that I'm surprised didn't get the top or runner-up spot, given the kind of backing that they have and their following, was the Young Bucks. But I know that they were a team that had a lot of, I think they were in the votes for others category. I know they got some votes, but not enough to get a runner-up position.
Yeah.
And it's significant to point out, and I didn't say this before, that the votes for others, the other teams that received first place votes, that was a pretty high percentage, 36%. So you could see that people were all over the map with their picks, and the Young Bucks had a great year and they're a great team. They flew under the mainstream radar again, but they got a lot of votes.
Yeah, and I don't think we should underestimate the accomplishments of the Usos, who would have gotten my vote. I thought they had just a fantastic year. I thought for a lot of 2014, they were essentially the number 2 babyface act in the company behind just John Cena. They were aligned with John Cena. They were featured really prominently in some main event spots. Again, I went to some house shows throughout the year where they stole the show night after night, working with the Wyatts, working with a variety of opponents. I think they are very much a throwback to that, 80s, early 90s tag team. They look alike. They're exciting. They are cohesive. And the fans love them. For years, all you saw out in the stands were the John Cena shirts, and now you see a lot of orange out there. I mean, I've got to think those guys are doing pretty well as far as merchandising money comes, and it's well earned. I'm a big fan of the Usos.
Why do you guys suppose it took so long for WWE to give them their due and give them somewhat of a push?
It's a good question. And I think that this is an issue that we've had in the past. Al kind of mentioned the the cohesiveness and how they're kind of a throwback tag team to kind of the classic era of tag team wrestling. But they're also interchangeable. We've debated internally when we're doing the PWI 500. Well, who's higher in the 500? Is it Jimmy or Jay? I mean, who does it matter? Because what they do is, the same. There's not a lot to differentiate them. I think for a long time they might have been seen as just a little too bland. But now in recent years they've added the face paint. They have the dance that comes out. They got their little catchphrase with the Uso, chant going with the crowd, and they finally connected. And I think once they began to connect with the audience with those little bits of color, if you will, that's when WWE kind of gave them a little bit more, gave them the ball a little bit more and gave them more of an opportunity.
Yeah, in a way, I think they've been hurt over the years by WWE's kind of prejudice against tag team wrestling, or at least Vince McMahon's. I mean, that perceived prejudice that he just doesn't see tag team wrestling as a major money-drawing part of the show. And because of that, maybe he and WWE always has their eyes on future singles potential of each tag team member. And as Dan alluded to, not that they don't have an upside as singles wrestlers, but it's just not something you really think of because they're so similar. I mean, they are really the ideal tag team act. And because of that, they just work really well as a tag team, and maybe even caught WWE off guard as far as their popularity. And I've had the opportunity to interview, I think, Jey Uso last year, and he talked about that, about putting it all together and the makeup and the war dance and all that. One thing that maybe doesn't get enough credit is Total Divas. I think Total Divas showed a side of Jim Uso, at least, that was likable, that was fun, that was funny. Maybe that got some more fans on their sides. So, again, well-earned, certainly deserved. I'm a big fan of the Usos.
But let me throw this in there. You talk about how they look alike. They are a caption writer's nightmare. At least the Bella twins did something about that. I don't know if the Usos can do that, can go that route.
Tattoos. I think that's what it comes down to. They have different tattoos.
Yeah, if Dustin Rhodes couldn't do it as Goldust back in '97 or '98, he was planning that same cosmetic change that Nikki underwent. I don't think the Usos could do the same.
No.
Let's talk about Match of the Year. Another one where I know votes were split kind of all over the place. Stu, who took home Match of the Year?
We have John Cena versus Bray Wyatt at 18%. Very low, again, a low total.
This was the last man standing match from Payback in June, right?
That is correct.
That had my vote. We talked about it, Dan. I think the best match I saw in 2014, not necessarily a 5-star match, but a really good one. Let's talk about what didn't win, and not necessarily a specific match, but just the fact that WrestleMania did not feature Match of the Year last year is interesting. I mean, I think if you go over history, more times than not, the Match of the Year takes place at WrestleMania, and there were some good matches at WrestleMania. Stu, why do you think that nothing on WrestleMania took home the award?
I think this is your classic example of the split vote. You had Daniel Bryan against Triple H, and then you had the the 3-way for the title, and a lot of people who may have thought that the Bryan versus Triple H match might have been better, they looked at the title change as more significant, and it all becomes a matter of philosophy of what you consider the criteria for Match of the Year. So